All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Athenianos Show, where each episode is a new ripple containing unknown but unlimited impact. Today, I am joined by a good friend, Tristan Sollecito, and we're going to be talking about movie and TV quotes, our top five movie quotes and our top five TV quotes. And these are quotes that are deeply personal to us, not what we think other people think are the best, not objectively what we think are the best, but what mean the most to us. So we are going to be talking about that. And Tristan, I understand that you have a TV show, right? As
Your
well.
understanding is correct. It is. It is a YouTube channel. It is a golf entertainment platform. It's called Tee It Up Golf, just the letter T. We're headed in some pretty exciting directions. We're not sure how it's going to all unfold yet. We're in the early stages, but if you're at all interested in the game of golf and or at all interested in being entertained in any way, shape, or form, I highly recommend it. More on that to come, I suppose.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And Tristan, where can people find that if they want to do? We'll talk about it more at the
So
end, but
we're on YouTube. That's our primary platform. There's an Instagram account as well. It's at Tee It Up Golf, just the letter T, with the Instagram handle has a period in between each word,
mm,
and the YouTube channel is just T, the letter T, It Up Golf. We can link that below, I suppose.
yeah, we can
And
put some
yeah,
links.
it's a good time. It really is. I have a background in golf. I have a background in acting, theater, and all types of entertainment. So it kind of throws all that together and hopefully puts out a pretty good piece of entertainment for sure.
Mm. And as I mentioned to you before, Tristan, now that you're a multi-timer on the show, you will get a bio on the website, theathenianoshow.com. So be sure to check that out. Um, all right. So I think, as you said, this is going to be top five quotes in in TV and movie. And we decided that we are going to start with movie quotes, working our way down from 5 to 10. So Tristan, you want to
Yes, sir.
start with your number five?
I would love to. Do you want me to read it first? Do we want to play the clip first?
Why don't you read it and then I will play it.
That sounds like a fantastic plan. So, obviously, as I'm sure you can all imagine, narrowing it down to five quotes, difficult task to accomplish. We have a lot of different directions we could go. I wanted to start with a classic. This is, if I'm not mistaken, in reverse order from five to one. So,
Correct.
is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
So my number five, and I'm pretty serious about my ordering of lists, and this is not just my top five. This is certainly ordered authentically and precisely and intentionally. So at number five, we have a quote from an absolute classic, The Wizard of Oz. A quote from the wizard himself, fittingly enough, the most, so to speak, wise character in the movie. The quote is, "You are under this delusion that simply because you run away from danger, you have no courage." That quote was spoken to the quote unquote cowardly lion, as I'm sure many of you could have imagined.
Mm.
I would love to play the clip and get a little
Yes,
bit
I
of
will.
a little
I
bit of the
will play
visual
it.
thing.
As for you, my fine friend, you're a victim of disorganized thinking. You are under the unfortunate delusion that simply because you run away from danger, you have no courage. You're confusing courage with wisdom. Back where I come from, we have men who are called heroes. Once a year, they take their fortitude out of mothballs and parade it down the main street of the city. And they have no more courage than you have.
All right, so Tristan, tell me about that quote. Why did you pick it?
So interestingly enough, it's not even necessarily a quote that I particularly agree with. I kind of define personally courage, bravery, toughness as sort of a willingness to put yourself through fear, emotional pain, physical pain, things of that nature. So I think this is somewhat contrary to that in the sense that he's kind of laying out different types of courage. To me, somebody who is particularly brave is somebody who's willing to endure those things that I mentioned, fear, etc. So, but what I do really like about it is that it's a reminder to me that we're defined more by our actions than our words and the words of others. So obviously the cowardly lion, quote unquote, is according to definitional standards, not a brave, courageous creature. But what's interesting about the film, and I think a lot of it is highly metaphorical, certainly, is that he is a living example of courage, right? He doesn't always necessarily exhibit it in a traditional or definitional way, like I said, but he is the most, I mean, I think the idea behind his character is that he is the most courageous character in the film. And so what it reminds me, while I don't necessarily agree with the premise, it's more important that we are living examples of positive character traits. Take courage, for example, right? It's not necessarily as important if other people or even ourselves define us that way in verbal or literate terms. But if we behave in a courageous way, that is what makes somebody courageous, brave, or not. And I think there are a lot of instances in life where even we ourselves, right, wouldn't necessarily define one of our actions or a sequence of actions as brave or courageous or any positive or negative trait. But what's more important, even if we don't even necessarily articulate this or understand this ourselves, is that we're living examples and behaving in the manner consistent with that positive trait. So I think obviously the lion does a lot more brave acts than he does brave words, lines, things of that nature. And obviously, I think one of the main ideas behind his character is that that is what makes him courageous. And obviously, we come to find out at the end of the film that that was within him throughout his entire journey.
So in some sense, is it about a willingness to be courageous that defines courage, and not necessarily the particular actions that you take in any given moment? Is that kind of what you were saying? I mean, because in the quote he says, right, you're under the unfortunate delusion that simply because you run away from danger, you have no courage. Um, and I guess the way I interpret that is, just because in one instance or in instances you have run from danger, that doesn't mean you don't possess courage. Is that?
Absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head. I think it boils down to that particular. I certainly agree, right? I think I'm trying to articulate this. Yeah, for sure. I think there are certainly circumstances where we may or may not exhibit that particular trait. That doesn't mean that in the moments of need for whatever that trait is, we're not going to exhibit it, right? That's what it boils down to. That's what we all care about, right? If there's an instance where the cowardly lion, let's take him for example, or somebody in real life runs away from danger, right? But is there to step up in a moment of need to protect somebody or defend somebody or save somebody, right? That's obviously what we're interested in, right? And if you apply that to human beings, I'm afraid of certain things, right? I might run from a spider or a snake or what have you, right? But in the moment of need, right, I'd like to think, and not just me specifically, but I think anybody would like to think that that's where their true colors would shine and show. So
Yeah.
I think it reminds me that your day-to-day activities and exhibitions of your character aren't necessarily consistent with what you would do in a moment of need, let's say, and not even need necessarily as it pertains to like saving people or being there for people, specifically as it pertains to courage. But if we're talking about kindness, right, there are plenty of people who crack some jokes, maybe aren't the most cordial, right, what have you. But in a moment of quote unquote need, right, in a moment where maybe somebody is suffering emotionally or what have you, right, their true colors can shine. So I think you can apply this to many different character traits, not just courage. And yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. That's kind of what it says to me. Maybe day to day you're not exhibiting that trait, but
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't necessarily mean it's not there when it needs to be.
I see. Well, that's a great start, Tristan. And I look forward to your other quotes. Um,
Oh yeah. Oh, yeah, no idea.
yeah, and if you've enjoyed this sneak peek, I would say be sure to hit the follow or subscribe button wherever you're watching. It's incredibly easy, and I really appreciate it, and Tristan appreciates it. So just do it. All right.
Just do it.
So my quote is from Casablanca. I actually have two quotes from Casablanca, but this is the first.
Stop.
And I could probably put all of my movie quotes from Casablanca, um, but I just picked two. So this quote is from when he is but why when Rick Blaine, who's the main character, is being questioned by officers of the Third Reich. Um, and the quote is when it's actually kind of cheating because there's two quotes in there. They're like back to back, but I think those this whole like conversation is really great. So I'm actually gonna play this clip, and then I'll tell you
Okay.
the moments that I really.
That's fair.
So let's see. Here we go.
Do you mind if I ask you a few questions? Unofficially, of course.
Make it official if you like.
What is your nationality?
I'm a drunkard.
And that makes Rick a citizen of the world.
I was born in New York City, if that'll help you any.
I understand that you came here from Paris at the time of the occupation.
Well, there seems to be no secret about that.
Are you one of those people who cannot imagine the Germans and their beloved Paris?
Not particularly my beloved Paris.
Can you imagine us in London?
When you get there, ask me.
Oh, diplomatist.
How about New York?
Well, there are certain sections of New York, Major, that I wouldn't advise you to try to invade.
Uh-huh. Who do you think will win the war?
I haven't the slightest idea.
Rick is completely neutral about everything, and that takes in the field of women, too.
You are not always so carefully neutral. We have a complete dossier on you. Richard Blaine, American, age 37, cannot return to his country. The reason is a little vague. We also know what you did in Paris, Mr. Blaine, and also we know why you left Paris. Don't worry, we are not going to broadcast it.
Oh, my eye's really brown.
You will forgive my curiosity, Mr. Blaine. The point is, an enemy of the Reich has come to Casablanca, and we are checking up on anybody who can be of any help to us.
Well, my interest in whether Victor Laszlo stays or goes is purely a sporting one.
In this case, you have no sympathy for the fox, huh?
Not particularly. I understand the point of view of the hound, too.
All right. So the two quotes that I love there. The first is when he asks him what's his nationality, and he says, "I'm a drunkard." And then the other guy says, "And that makes Rick a citizen of the world." I love that quote. And then the other part is when they're asking him, "Oh, could you imagine the Germans in Paris, in London, blah, blah, blah." And then he says, "Could you imagine the Germans in New York?" And he says, "Well, Major, there are certain sections of New York that I wouldn't advise you to invade." I love that quote, and I love the drunkard quote because I'll take them one by one. All right, so the I'm a drunkard in response to the nationality I love because remember this is at a time this movie was made during World War II. This is at a time when nationalism is at its peak. And he just, I think, cuts through this answer with "I'm a drunkard," which is obviously meant to be a joke, but at the same time, um, I think there is something incredibly unifying about not
That's
necessarily admitting
precisely the word that
really. I was gonna say
it
it's not
was.
necessarily like the drunkard aspect, but it's more like the wretchedness of the human experience and acknowledging your um your shortcomings and your sufferings and your struggles. And he says it so casually in the term drunkard, but I think that is those things are what unites people across the world is in a lot of sense their sufferings, their negative thoughts, their shortcomings, etc. And so the line "and that makes Rick a citizen of the world" exemplifies that. And I think it's brilliant writing. And the second part is there are certain sections of New York I would advise you to invade. Being from New York, like that is it's impossible not to cheer from that line because New Yorkers have traditionally pride themselves on being tough, on sticking up to people, on being brutal. Don't mess with New York. And Humphrey Bogart, the actor, is actually from New York. He went to Trinity. Um, and it's just like, he's saying this to these, Nazi officers who don't even know what he's talking about. And it's just like, and he's been away from New York for his entire life. He's in Morocco. Um, and he's just like, there's certain parts of New York that I wouldn't advise you guys to invade. It's just like to me, it's like it's the perfect rallying cry for New Yorkers. It's like, you know, I don't care who it is, you don't mess with us, you know?
Concrete
And
jungle.
yeah, and that's and I think every New Yorker would agree that um there's parts of New York that you don't mess with, you know? You don't fuck around
So
in those parts. Um you don't fuck around with New Yorkers. So I think that's a great I love that. And that's just always been something that I've like reminded myself very frequently. It's just a good moment to me.
certainly. No, I love, and I have a bunch of these coming. I love that the first line that you isolated, but the drunkard line, I did not glean anything meaningful from it. I found it funny, right? But it wasn't until you went on that great little spiel. I have a lot of lines like that as well, and I think it's cool that not only are there, obviously this is a whole kind of celebration of cinematic art, right? TV, movies. Not only are there a lot of lines that kind of fly under the radar and have deep meaning in film, but it can also have deep meaning to you individually or on a personal level, or both, right? And I think that's what's I'm excited to see what else is to come, obviously, because I did not glean that, I did not get that at first listen. So yeah, I really appreciate that insight, and I think you're totally right. Unifying was, as I started to kind of process it, certainly a word that popped into my head. um and I think it's interesting because I think purely from that scene alone and potentially the movie at large, like you get a very clear sort of nationalistic feeling, I should say, right? Um, Not even necessarily a negative one, but a true sense of pride in one's country. And what's, I think really moving about that line, and is even more so your explanation and analysis of it, is that pride in one's country can kind of go hand in hand with pride in the world at large, right? And the human race at large. So I appreciate um, that understanding and that interpretation. I really do.
Okay. And with that, Tristan, why don't we move to your fourth quote? So then
Four.
Why don't you give it to me?
All right. So this one, I think we'll go in the same direction. I think we'll play the clip, because it's kind of all it's all. First of all, before we play the clip, I will warn you. This clip is from potentially the greatest piece of. Oh, I'm sorry. We're doing. Excuse me. I have my lists confused. I was thinking we were going the TV route, but we are not. We are certainly not at this
All right, so
particular
we'll
point
save
in time.
we'll keep that in mind for the TV. But it's a good
Yes,
one.
I was going my mind was going there because I was going to number 4 on TV. But we're not there yet. We will
All right.
be. Certainly stick around. This okay, yes. So this is a quote. And I like I'm pleased about with sharing this because this is not a quote that I necessarily would have thought of as a hugely important quote in my life until you tasked me with the assignment of selecting my top 5 quotes, and I realized that this quote from the Mighty Ducks, a movie that I grew up on, is one that I remind myself of and largely live by on a fairly regular basis, completely subconsciously. Like I didn't even necessarily process this as a, like I said, a hugely important quote. But I had to throw it in there because, like we were talking about on a personal level, I have learned a lot from it without even necessarily realizing so. Without further ado, I would like to. We can still go that route. Let's play the clip. The important piece to keep in mind is the Charlie. For those who aren't familiar with the film, the young man who retorts, "If you had missed a quarter of an inch the other way, you would have missed completely." And the context will
All right.
describe
I mean,
what I mean.
we're talking about it's a movie about hockey here, right?
It is. That is correct.
So I will play the clip, and then you'll tell me when I should be paying attention.
Talk to the guys?
I tried. I think I'm a traitor for even showing up.
Guess they really hate me, huh?
Is it true you were really a hawk?
Yeah.
Peter said you blew a really big game once.
Yeah, well, Peter's right. It was the last game of the state finals. We were tied 2-2 in the end of the third period. I get a penalty shot. I go in, I triple deke, I fake the goalie right out of his pads. Puck's headed in, and then clang. Hits the post. We lost in overtime. A quarter of an inch this way and it would have gone in. A quarter of an inch, Charlie.
Well, yeah, but a quarter of an inch the other way and you would have missed completely.
I never thought of it that way.
At least you got to play in a championship game. God, that must have been so cool.
So yeah, excuse some of the corny acting in my opinion, but yeah, I think what's up?
I thought it was good acting.
No, hey, Emilio Estevez, certainly up there to say the least. Yeah, so I think that first of all, phenomenal film. That's number one. Number two, I identify as something close to a perfectionist, and I think that has hindered me in many moments in my life, and I think that quote has kind of stuck in the back of my head subconsciously in moments where I think I maybe take that a little bit too far. Learning to live with something less than perfection, which we certainly always will have to as human beings. And I think that especially for me in particular, and I alluded to this, right? Golf, acting, those are my two passions, my two career paths, if you will. And in both cases, right, the funny thing is in hockey, there is sort of a binary goal, right? You either, on a penalty shot, let's say, you either score or you don't. In golf, there's plenty of times when I hit a good, not great shot, and I'm disappointed, right? And I don't take the positives from it. In acting, I deliver a good but not great performance, right? And I'm thinking, what could I have done better? How could that have been perfect, right? And not that those thoughts aren't productive, but learning to take the positives, appreciate them, and again, an understanding that some breaks are going to go your way and some are not, right? And the ones that are just important as the ones that aren't. So even today I played golf. I had a full round today, and I remember I missed a putt and I came up short on an approach to the green. I was going through all these things in my head, like, oh, if it had just bounced this way, if it had just bounced that way, I would be shooting, even better, whatever. And then I realized today this exact phenomenon. The hole before, I hit a tree and it bounced completely towards the back towards the fairway, and I got a good break. And I didn't really even appreciate it in the moment, right? I was harping so heavily on the moments that broke away from my goals. So I guess what it boils down to me is an appreciation of your success, especially when it's not a binary goal system, and success to any level, and being able to learn from that, right? And take, I'm really very much personally into positive feedback. Use what you did well, build on it, and don't harp too much on the negatives, which I tend to do, and I think wrongly so. So
I yeah, I definitely relate a lot to this quote because I too um consider myself somewhat of a perfectionist when it comes to things that I care about. And if I miss or screw up or don't hit the exact target that I'm aiming for in something, my thought process is always, you know, man, just needed a little bit more, or could have, gotten there. And I never stop to think, well, how about, the fact that I actually got, this close, or that I'm all the way here. Um, and it's a quote that really reminds you to remember and think about, okay, well, yeah, you may not have, right now gotten all the way where you wanted to go, but think about the fact that you're even in this position to be able to potentially get there. And all the distance that you've traveled. It's like when you're on a journey to get to some place, I don't know, and you're just taking a boat journey, and you end up, you're traveling 2,000 miles on foot, let's say, sorry, forget the boat journey. You're traveling 2,000 miles on foot, and you finish 50 miles short because you're just exhausted and you can't do it anymore. Yes, are you disappointed? You didn't make, you got to 9,000, sorry, 1,950. You're disappointed you didn't complete your goal. But at the same time, I think it would be important to look at the fact that you had to do something pretty incredible to get that close to where you can say, I just needed 50 more miles. You know what I mean? Like the fact that you got to that point where you can say to yourself, oh, I just needed this more. Oh, I was in the running. I just missed it. That should be something to celebrate in and of itself.
absolutely.
But I think people very rarely do that. So your quote is a good reminder to
Yeah, and
appreciate the journey.
go ahead. Yeah, I love the writing too. Even Charlie slips in that little line at the end, like, "Oh, how cool is it that you got to even play in a championship game?" Like you were saying, right? So it's even not even as it specifically pertains to that task of scoring or not. Like you said, appreciating even the opportunities to be there. And certainly I can apply that to many things that I do on a daily basis. I had a privilege, the blessing to even play golf today. If I had played poorly, that would not be any different. So appreciating the opportunities, appreciating your own successes to whatever degree that may be. So
All right. Well, with that, I think I'm going to move to my number 4. Um, this is from my cousin Vinny. Uh, for those of you who have not seen this movie, I highly recommend that you do. It's a very funny movie. I think you'll get a taste of why. For context, he is a lawyer arguing for his nephews who are falsely convicted of murder. But he's in Alabama and he is from New York and he's completely out of place and doesn't know what he's doing. But this is a scene when he's cross-examining a witness. So let's take a look.
Is it possible the two defendants entered the store, picked 22 specific items off of the shelves, had the clerk take money, make change, then leave? Then two different men drive up in a similar... Don't shake your head, I'm not done yet. Wait till you hear the whole thing so you can understand this now. Two different men drive up in a similar looking car, go in, shoot the clerk, rob him, and then leave?
No, they didn't have enough time.
Well, how much time was they in the store?
5 minutes.
5 minutes? Are you sure? Did you look at your watch?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. You testified earlier that the boys went into the store and you had just begun to make breakfast. You were just ready to eat and you heard a gunshot. That's right, I'm sorry. So obviously it takes you 5 minutes to make breakfast.
That's right.
Right, so you knew that. Do you remember what you had?
Eggs and grits.
Eggs and grits. I like grits too. How do you cook your grits? You like them regular, creamy, or al dente?
Just regular, I guess.
Regular. Instant grits?
No self-respecting Southerner uses instant grits. I take pride in my grits.
So, Mr. Tipton, how could it take you 5 minutes to cook your grits when it takes the entire grit-eating world 20 minutes?
I don't know. I'm a fast cook, I guess.
I'm sorry, I was all the way over here. I couldn't hear you. Did you say you're a fast cook? That's it? Are we to believe that boiling water soaks into a grit faster in your kitchen than on any place on the face of the earth?
I don't know.
Well, perhaps the laws of physics cease to exist on your stove. Were these magic grits? I mean, did you buy them from the same guy who sold Jack his beanstalk beans?
Objection, Your Honor.
Objection sustained.
Are you
Mr.
sure about that
Tipton,
5
you can
minutes?
ignore the question.
Are you sure about that 5 minutes?
I don't know.
I think you made your point.
Are you sure about that 5 minutes?
I may have been mistaken.
I got no more use for this guy.
All right, so that was the great Joe Pesci, ladies and gentlemen. And so the line that I picked out from that speech was, well, perhaps the laws of physics cease to exist on your stove. Were these magic grits? I mean, did you buy them from the same guy who sold Jack his beanstalk beans? You know, this is mainly
Brilliant
just, I love
delivery.
it's comedy. It's brilliant delivery. It's brilliant comedy. And what makes this movie personally so funny to me, and the reason I chose this quote is, so my dad was born and raised in New York. My mom was born and raised in the South, right? So Joe Pesci is a New York guy in Alabama. My mom spent most of her childhood in Alabama. This guy is completely out of place. And it's just, it's funny to me because, so I'll tell a funny story about my parents. When my dad met my mom's family in the South for the first time, he was trying really hard to fit in and act like a real Southern guy, I guess. So they ordered breakfast, and my dad thought he was being like this like macho guy by ordering like ton of eggs, bacon, sausage, hash brown, all this stuff. And then every other single guy in the family ordered biscuits and gravy. And so he was like this standout. And so I love the idea of like, New York guy comes into the South, doesn't know what the hell he's doing. Um, and but you know, it's the grits, it's the Southern food that is his decisive moment in this particular case, and what disproves this Southern guy's testimony, because he's like, and it's particularly good because the Southern guy initially acts like the Joe Pesci character doesn't know what the hell grits are, and is like confused about all this stuff, and then he comes back and says, well, actually, you know let's talk about these grits. And I love the whole idea about this, um, you know, New York, Brooklyn guy who's never tried grits in his life, and now he's giving a full speech, cross-examining a witness on the basis of cooking grits. So I love this.
Yeah, I first of all, I'm Italian. Pardon me for generalizing, but I feel fairly confident in assuming that Mr. Vincenzo is of Italian descent.
Yes.
Um,
And by the
yeah,
way,
you know,
shout out to, oh, I was gonna say, by the way, shout out to Marissa Tomei in this movie, because she's also Italian and she does a phenomenal job in this movie. I didn't pick a quote from her, but she nails this, and I think she got an Oscar for this. So, this is Italian
really,
pride in movies. Yeah.
oh yeah, and also second side note, biscuits and gravy. People from the South, anybody from the South watching, I don't get it. I don't. It's not a meal to me. It certainly could be a fairly intriguing side, but it's bread and sauce. I'm not with it. I'm not I don't have anything further. Yeah, no, I think it's interesting actually. I have a food related quote coming up as well, and I think that food is particularly interesting as a unifying um as a unifying piece of art, potentially piece of culture, when you think about how different cultures take their food, make their food, eat their food. Um, no, I appreciate that. I do. And what's I think particularly striking, and I think what's so relatable about that scene is how deeply ingrained the food oriented culture is in each of Vinny and the man on at the stands, um, deeply ingratiated in their um, within them, right? Like grits to everybody there means something. Al dente pasta to the Italian community in the room means something. And it's so ingratiated and it's so relatable and it's so often taken for granted in the sense that it's almost second nature. And I think it's funny. Part of the humor certainly is how obvious some of those connections and references are. And I think it's a reminder that our culture is so ingrained within us that it's almost impossible, if not impossible, to um, not let it protrude into our daily life, into our conversations with others of other cultures, and let it sort of, in one way or another, color what we're saying, what we're doing, and how we're behaving. So.
Mm, agreed. All right, Tristan, what's up next?
Let's do it. So I first of all, I'm kind of liking the play the clip. I don't know. What do you? I like playing
Yeah,
the clip
I,
first. I like the little bit of a suspense element to it.
I think that the suspense is good. Um, playing the
I'll
clip.
throw out this quote. I think it's a big
All
one.
right.
So
This
this
is this
quote
is
is from the Hunger Games.
right.
So the quote is hope, or the idea is hope is the only thing that is stronger than fear. And obviously, I think in this particular context, thing is representative of emotions. Obviously, there are things more powerful than fear, but um, in the purview of emotions. The idea behind this quote from President Snow, who's essentially the antagonistic dictator of the community of Panem, which is where it takes place in this sort of fantastical, futuristic United States. Obviously we'll play the clip, but hope being stronger, the only emotion stronger than fear, and then obviously we will discuss. Let it play.
She shot an arrow at your head.
Well, at an apple.
Near your head. Sit down. Seneca, why do you think we have a winner?
What do you mean?
I mean, why do we have a winner? I mean, if we just wanted to intimidate the districts, why not round up 24 of them at random and execute them all at once? It'd be a lot faster. Hope.
Hope?
Hope. It is the only thing stronger than fear. A little hope is effective. A lot of hope is dangerous. A spark is fine, as long as it's contained.
So,
contain it.
Yeah. So it's a particularly chilling scene if you're familiar with the movie. I don't want to spoil anything, but obviously, as I'm sure many of you know, it's the reference to executing 24 children is the Hunger Games, which, you know, obviously the purpose of it from the perspective of that man, President Snow, is to impart fear and impart dominance over the land. And, you know, I think that it reminds me, that particular quote, why we make some of the choices as human beings that we do, and how we're able to navigate some of our negative emotions by overcoming them with positive emotions, right? There are plenty of things we do probably on a daily basis that are scary, that impart fear, but we do them for a particular payoff. And I think that he absolutely is correct. I absolutely relate to that particular quote. There are plenty of times in my life, and I would advise others if I have the I suppose, what's the word? Power to say that. To not let fear suppress hope. And I think that hope is, you know, it's interesting, right? When sometimes we look back on some of our choices and we wonder, how did I muster up the courage to do that? How did I muster up the the preparation, right? Whatever it took to achieve or even fail at a particularly scary task? The answer is more than often hope, right? I think that is something that is it is a driving force in a lot of the choices that we make, whether we identify that, recognize that, or not. And I think that it's important to embrace that and lean into it, and to understand and remember in moments of potential fear that hope is very often, if not always, a is worth striving for, even when faced with something that could result in a negative outcome.
Well, I'm not going to say too much about the hope aspect, because I could go on a long tangent there, and I'll just tell people that as you know, I do have an episode on the philosophy of hope.
Oh yeah.
But what I will say is, actually, to me, the more interesting part of that was when he says, uh, a little bit of hope, good. I'm paraphrasing. A little bit of hope, good. Too much hope, and that's dangerous. Um, and by the way, I also have a episode on that relationship between like, you know, the state giving the people too much hope in order to preserve it and etc. And that's psychological power part two. But I um digress. But anyway, I think that's really interesting because that's something that I'm thinking about a lot is if you want to control a group of people, I I've kind of concluded in my mind that the best way to do that is to have overt control disguised as like to have power over a certain group, but have that be disguised in something else. And the way to disguise that is to make the people think that they still have some degree of hope or power, let's say, or capacity to change things, and uh, obtain their desires, whatever they may be. And so, um, and the reason for that is because if overt force is not necessarily stable, because people then know it and recognize it, and you crush them, and so when you crush them, they have nothing to lose. They're just gonna revolt and go all out. And if they have too much hope, they're gonna realize that they have so much power and a legitimate chance to change things. So they're also going to you know not fall in line and disobey because they're going to see that they have the capacity to change things. But if you keep it at a minimum where they have a little bit, um, or you make them think they have a little bit, then they're not likely to necessarily completely revolt against you because they still think they can get what they want. But in reality, the system is such that what they can get is incredibly limited. So you keep on giving them ounces and ounces and ounces of hope, thinking they can get there. But in reality, you've closed that door, but they don't know it. So I thought that was an interesting thing, but that's not really relevant to your
Well,
quotes.
no, it's interesting because it's interesting that you had that impression because I was going to say, and I guess you proved me wrong, it's sort of an open ended point that he's making to his colleague, Seneca Crane. He doesn't even necessarily detail what the hope is going to do for himself, right? He's not really necessarily laying out for the audience what the power is going to earn him. And that was kind of the impression that I had. But to me, what I took away from that is it doesn't necessarily matter because the way that he's controlling people is their own emotion, and the stronger that emotion is, the more successful he's going to be. So finding which emotions are particularly strong in the typical person is his route to control, which is an interesting thing when you think about and realize the fact that it almost doesn't really matter which emotions those are as long as they're strong. And that's kind of an interesting point that I certainly took away from it. But I'm interested and impressed that you took a little bit more of a specific route to that analysis.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, I do. This is something that's on my mind very frequently. So, but anyway, I won't dwell on this, and maybe we should move on.
Sure, absolutely.
So this is from a movie called The Maltese Falcon.
Big Humphrey Bogart.
Another Humphrey Bogart movie. As you can tell, I am a fan. Um, and this is at the end of the movie, the very end. So if you haven't watched the movie and you would like to watch the movie, maybe don't watch this part and skip to the next part because there maybe is some spoilers.
Spoiler alert.
But also just watch it because it's good. So yeah.
Harry, what is it?
The stuff that dreams are made of.
Huh?
All right. So I think it's pretty obvious that the quote there is this stuff that dreams are made of. And he delivered that line.
By the way,
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm liking clip first, quote second. I'm liking that.
All right. Good to know. Oof.
Yeah.
Uh,
If you disagree, certainly.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I kind of like it too. I think he nailed that line. By the way, that delivery was really good.
I agree.
And it's a great line. The stuff that dreams are made of. And for a little bit of context, again, this is spoilers. The movie is basically the main character that Humphrey Bogart plays is a detective, and the movie is about this large, basically criminal chase for a gold falcon that is supposedly worth a very large sum of money, and these crooks go through this extravagant plan to get this falcon, and some people are killed. Some people are endangered, some people are hurt, whatever. And they finally get the falcon, and they open it up, and it's a fake. It's completely fake. Um, and so the two criminals, the detective calls the police, arrests the two criminals. Another woman who's also kind of involved in this gets arrested, and that's who you see leaving. But there's also an unambiguous love interest in the thing, and so the police comes and they ask the detective, "What is the Falcon?" And he says, "The stuff that dreams are made of." And I love that because it's such a cynical line. Um, because it's like you have these people chasing after dreams and hopes of getting this one thing, this gold falcon, and then their lives are going to be great, and their plans were to go off and move to a foreign country and live extravagantly because they have all this money from the falcon, and they do all these things to chase it down. And in reality, it leaves them with nothing. And it just um, it just completely kills any dream or hope if they had of getting whatever they thought they were going to get from this falcon. And the fact that he says this stuff the dreams are made of, it's like, well, I mean, that's again, it's a very cynical line, but it's saying, okay, your dreams, um, of the dreams that you have in reality, they're false gold, I guess, is the best way to put it. And so again, it's a very cynical line, but I think it's a master in writing. Its delivery is great, and I love the cynicism of it.
Yeah, it reminds me actually of English class when we were in eighth grade. We weren't in the same particular class, but we had the same teacher. And I remember him describing what a metaphor was because we kind of like for the most part, knew in practice what it is, but couldn't really necessarily put a definition to it. And he described sort of a mythical blue pen, right, where he would theoretically, right, pass around a blue pen to the best student of the week or the day or whatever the case, and describe to us how the blue pen became a metaphor for success in the class, let's say. And so what this reminds me of is that there are a lot of things that we overlook in our day-to-day lives, right, and don't even necessarily realize are metaphorical or potentially even like indirect, right? Even money itself, right? We're not really in pursuit of money, the paper form of currency, right? We're in pursuit of what that earns us, right? We're not necessarily in pursuit of a conversation with somebody in and of itself, right? We're in pursuit of the knowledge or wisdom that we can gain from it, right? So there's all these things that are popping into my head now after hearing that quote that I'm starting to realize are way more metaphorical or indirect than I would probably potentially assume many others don't even recognize as an indirect path to the ultimate prize, the ultimate goal, the ultimate pursuit.
Yeah, I agree, and I guess the thing that comes to mind is, you talk about means and ends, and I think a lot of times the things that people think are ends in their lives are really means to something else. But they treat those
Yeah.
means as ends. The thing just comes to mind is, somebody who spends their whole life constantly thinking about how he can or he or she can just make the most possible money, right? All that's on their mind is making the most amount of money or getting the most amount of money. Um, and that may seem like their end, but I think in reality there is something more that they are hoping to obtain from getting X amount of money that they hope to obtain. Um, Meaning some comfortability with their life, or maybe the idea that you can have a certain status with that money, or maybe you can free yourself. You think you can free yourself from other things in some way, or maybe you think it's going to bring you happiness. But but in a lot of ways, the money is not really the end to which you are aiming. The money is a means to which you are trying to get something else. And I think a lot of times when people uh, conflate those two things, and put too much emphasis on means and lose track of the end that they're really aiming at, um, they can really torture themselves, and lose track of what's important. I think both of us can think of a lot of examples of people who have ungodly amounts of money and are, not particularly happy people. And so, yeah, I think that's what I was just thinking.
No, that's a very astute point, and I think it kind of, not to get overly philosophical, although you might certainly enjoy that.
Listen,
Um,
I'm
it kind of makes me wonder. Well, beyond major philosophy aficionado, um, it kind of makes me wonder and question, like, is there an end, right, to our the chain of the sequence of goals or prizes, right? Like I think of like a young person buying a car, right? I don't own a car, but when a young person is looking for their first car, it's not the actual physical specimen, the physical piece of machinery, right? It's the freedom, the ability to roam around and travel and go places, right? It's funny that even that, I'm sure, if we delve deeper into it, comes with a whole chain and spider web of other opportunities that keep building on themselves. So yeah, good stuff. Really good stuff.
Yeah. Okay, and with that, Tristan, I think we'll move to number 2 on the list, inching towards the top.
Oh yeah. So let's do it. You know what? Let's live on the edge a little bit. Just play the clip, and we'll discuss.
Man, I'm excited to hear this already. Oh man.
This is
Mr.
You got it fired up?
Yep.
Oh man. So this is one that has a couple nice quotable lines for sure. The final one is the one that I'm getting at, but certainly a lot to unpack here. So without further ado,
here we go.
Go ahead.
The old lady is a food lover.
This is about your cooking.
Hey, that's Gusto. I mean, look.
Great cooking is not for the faint of heart. You must be imaginative, strong-hearted. You must try things that may not work. And you must not let anyone define your limits because of where you come from. Your only limit is your soul. What I say is true. Anyone can cook, but only the fearless can be great.
Pure poetry.
All right.
I love that scene. And I love that. I love how much Remy, the protagonist, what's that?
Great movie, by the way.
Sensational film. Yeah, I love the way he like internalizes it and is just so deeply moved by a human. It's just I find that funny and cool. But yeah, the quote that I would like to point out, and I think there are like 3 there at least that are highly quotable and analytically and have analytical potential. But anyone can cook, but only the fearless can be great. You know, I think it's interesting because anyone can cook is a mantra that's used throughout the film, and I think on a very human level, right? I think we internalize that simply and critically at the same time. At least personally, and I would venture to say others as well. Like we kind of accept that to be remotely and somewhat true, right? That mantra, anyone can cook, but we kind of have this cynical vibe in the back of our minds, right? Where we're like, well, that's not necessarily true. But when he breaks it down like that, it kind of lays it all out and really explains what the true meaning of the motto is, right? It's anybody can do almost anything, really. But doing it isn't enough, right? Greatness is what we should be striving for, and only the fearless can achieve that. I think that's really powerful. I think that's very very profound, and I think it's a reminder to me that while I may be doing plenty of things on a daily or regular basis, that shouldn't be the extent of my goals, right? To achieve a task, I should be striving to achieve them well, and the only way to accomplish that is to launch into it fearlessly and bravely and holding nothing back. So I really like that line. Don't let your forget, I'm paraphrasing, but don't let anybody write you off because of where you come from. Your only limitation is your soul, something of that nature, right? Like you can unpack a lot of these things, but to me, that's the one that stands out. And I think it's absolutely true. If you're looking to achieve greatness, fear is going to be pretty much a non-starter in that equation, in my opinion. So,
as somebody who considers himself a master chef,
oh boy, what, lentil soup? You mean?
No, we got more than lentil soup going. We got a whole, gastronomic arsenal. Um, but yeah, you're right. That quote did stand out to me in that clip. Is everyone could cook, but only the fearless can cook great, or something? What was it? Only the fearless can be great, or something like
Can be.
that.
Oh.
Yeah. So it made me think of the moment. Okay, but like, what does it mean to be fearless? And the thing my mind immediately went to was being fearless means being not afraid to fail. That's what my mind
Right.
will do. And like I think there's tons of ways to define uh fearlessness, but in the context of cooking, that's what I kind of thought. And the reason for that is in order to be great, I think it requires a certain authenticity, a certain creativity, um, and a certain willingness to try new things and go above and beyond. But at the same time, when you go beyond just the recipe book, let's say, and you go beyond, what's comfortable, you are inviting a greater risk that what
Mm-hmm.
you are making could be, you know, you not good or tasteless or disgusting or whatever. Um, and but it's only the people who are not afraid of potentially failing who actually try and go out and go above and beyond because the fear of failure is not great enough to overcome their desire or ambition to be great. And that in turn is what separates them from other people and makes them great. Oh, sorry.
No worries. You know, it actually reminds me of a quote that I live by largely, and actually derived. I would like to think. I've never heard it before, so I would like to think that I discovered it. If anybody else would like to take credit for it, but it's something that I remind myself of, and it's true of myself, and I would hope others as well. I'm not afraid to be wrong, but I'm really, really terrified of not being right. And I think in many, many circumstances, being wrong is on the path to being right. And I would never fear being wrong um, in an effort to sacrifice a potential of discovery, right? I think that certainly equates to cooking. It equates to many, many, many things, certainly. And I think it's pretty clear and pretty obvious, right? Even for young children for whom this movie and is uh, is is pushed, is directed. You know, I think if you're gonna strive to discover, if you're gonna strive for greatness, being wrong and failure is certainly gonna happen along the way. And if you're afraid of that, you're never going to get to anything substantial.
Mm. I think you gotta trademark that quote, Tristan, pretty soon.
Oh, I will.
Yeah.
Well,
All right, shall we move on to the next one?
we should. Yes.
All right. So this this is cool. My number two. Sorry, I jumped the gun. My number two is from a movie called um The Usual Suspects. And funny enough, that name comes from a famous quote from Casablanca, the title of the movie. And again, this is a spoiler. So if you haven't seen this movie, The Usual Suspects, and would like to see it, probably see the movie first and then watch this. Um, but I'm not going to say the quotes, and I'm going to try to let you guess which
Well, let it play. Let it play.
Let it play. It's long. It's
Let's
a
hear it.
little bit over 3 minutes, but all right.
Some say his father was German. Nobody ever believed he was real. Nobody ever knew him or saw anybody that ever worked directly for him. But to hear Kobayashi tell it, anybody could have worked for Soze. You never knew. That was his power. The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist. One story the guys told me, the story I believe, was from his days in Turkey. There was a gang of Hungarians that wanted their own mob. They realized that to be in power, you didn't need guns or money or even numbers. You just needed the will to do what the other guy wouldn't. After a while, they come into power and then they come after Soze. He was small time then, just running dope, they say. They come to his home in the afternoon, looking for his business. They find his wife and kids in the house and decide to wait for Soze. He comes home to find his wife raped and children screaming. The Hungarians knew Soze was tough, not to be trifled with, so they let him know they meant business. They tell him they want his territory, all his business. Soze looks over the faces of his family. Then he showed these men of will what will really was. He tells him he would rather see his family dead than live another day after this. He lets the last Hungarian go. He waits until his wife and kids are in the ground, and then he goes after the rest of the mob. He kills their kids, he kills their wives, he kills their parents and their parents' friends. He burns down the houses they live in and the stores they work in. He kills people that owe them money. And like that, he's gone. Underground. Nobody's ever seen him since. He becomes a myth, a spook story that criminals tell their kids at night. Rat on your pop, and Kaiser Soze will get you. And no one ever really believes. Do you believe in him, Verbal? Keaton always said, I don't believe in God, but I'm afraid of him. Well, I believe in God. And the only thing that scares me is Kaiser Soze.
All right, can you guess which part?
I can't. I
No?
have two. Um, I run the risk of being too obvious, potentially. The last quote, is it the greatest trick the devil ever pulled
Yeah.
was convincing the world he doesn't exist?
Yeah. That's it. And
There you go. Look at
and the reason I love this quote is because this quote haunts me a lot. This quote really haunts me. Because I think it touches on so many things, like temptation, like deception, like you know, bad inclination. Like there's so many things that this touches on. And there's been so many instances where I've done things that in I would say 90% of days or 90% of the day I do not want to do and um would be very much against doing. And then, in like a small part, you're kind of like guilted into doing it in some sense. Not guilted, but for some reason um, in a particular moment, it almost feels like in the moment you don't feel this way, but afterwards you're like, you know, that wasn't me. Like, what was that? Why did I do that? Like, that's I don't want to do this. I don't want to be like this person who does this. I don't want to have any association with this. And yet, like, it keeps on coming back and hitting you and hitting you. And, um, you know, it's, there's been a lot of times in my head where I'm trying to think about it. Okay, you know, is it me? And again, like, this is going to sound kind of meta for some people and kind of crazy, but like, this is totally honesty. Like, in some cases, it's like, is it a problem with me? You make all these lifestyle choices. Like, I gotta fix something. I gotta fix something with myself, and a lot of times you do. And then in some cases, it's like it keeps on coming back and coming back and pulling you in one direction when you don't want it to. And in some cases, you may think, oh well, this is just my in the moment you think, okay, for some reason you think, okay, well, this is what I want. This is what I want, and I'm going to do it because my desire is so strong this way. And then afterwards, you regret it so much. But in that moment, you don't realize that the thing you desire is contrary to your interests um, overall. And so it's just, yeah, man, this quote freaks me the fuck out because it's like it in a lot of ways it rings true in my head. Is like the worst things that you do, if there is a devil, it seems like he causes you to do them without realizing that he's causing you to do them, and that's what makes it so hard to stop and get rid of, so to speak. And so yeah, that's why this quote is number two for me. I know we're getting into the issues here, but
Oh yeah.
yeah, I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think that the scariest element of that to me is because I agree with you. Well, I mean, I personally am a very religious person. I believe there is a devil. Um, I think the most startling part is how quickly and how shortly thereafter the realization that it was wrong
Yeah.
sets in. When
It's
you do
all
something that
it's like
right, it's almost immediate, right? It's very bizarre in that way, and it's like you do have that feeling of like, how could that have looked so different 5 seconds ago? Um, and obviously there's a whole lot of religious specific um conversation to be had that we probably don't have time for, but
not right now, at
I
least.
think I guess I'll have to come up with some level of a positive in my life. I mean, I think my response to that is remembering that it's not you, um, and that everybody's going to make those mistakes, and that God is. I think a lot of people come back to the idea that God knows you're trying, God is there to support you, God loves you, which is all true. But I think often overlooked is that God is specifically pushing you towards what is right, knowing that there are going to be bumps and bruises along the way. And I think true bravery is accepting that and understanding that there are going to be moments where you don't behave like the person that you really are. And I struggle with this, but not fearing that it might deep down be within you when you know it's really not.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my response. And sometimes I'm not able to do that, or seemingly so. I probably am, but I don't. And
Mhm.
that's kind of my response on a personal level. Yeah, that bravery and maturity to understand how deeply you believe what you believe and know what you know, and how secure you can be in yourself to recognize I did something that wasn't me, and I'm not going to be afraid of that because it's going to happen.
Mm.
And I know that that's not the true person that I am.
Yeah. Well, look, I appreciate you putting a positive spin on this. Um, because yeah, it's hard for me to do, but you're right. It is weird how like it is instant. Like after you do that thing, it's like it's almost instant where you're like that person that did that thing like 5 seconds ago is a different person from the person that's
Yeah, it's almost surreal.
it's a very strange feeling. But again, we don't really have time to dwell on it. Maybe we'll leave this for another conversation. Um, yeah. But yeah,
Sure.
Tristan, why don't you give me the numero uno of Tristan
Here we
Sollecito?
go. This is undoubtedly my favorite movie quote on planet Earth. This one was probably made my list 10 seconds into my search. This is from Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. Like you said about Casablanca, I'm sure I could fill my entire top 5 with HP quotes. This particular clip that's about to be played, I'll let you guess as well if you want
Okay.
which one I'm going for, but there are a plethora of options. Um, the last one in particular is the quote that I'm directing you all towards.
Well, you just told me now, so I don't
And
have to guess.
well, you don't know when that's going to come.
It's true.
So
All right.
let it play. There's a lot to unpack. There certainly is.
I'll play the clip. Yeah.
I've always prized myself on my ability to turn a phrase. Words are, in my not so humble opinion, our most inexhaustible source of magic, capable of both inflicting injury and remedying it. But I would, in this case, amend my original statement to this. Help will always be given at Hogwarts to those who deserve it. Do not pity the dead, Harry. Pity the living. And above all those who live without love.
Professor, my mother's Patronus was a doe, wasn't it? That's the same as Professor Snape's. It's curious, don't you think?
Actually, if I think about it, it doesn't seem curious at all. I'll be going now, Harry.
Professor? Is this all real? Or is it just happening inside my head?
Of course it's happening inside your head, Harry. Why should that mean that it's not real?
All right. I think I can figure it out.
So I don't want to spoil anything because any of you out there have not seen Harry Potter, there's a problem and that needs to be fixed as quickly as possible. But yeah, yeah, I'm not gonna. I think I could spill the beans. I love this quote, and the quote is, "Of course, it's happening inside your head. Why should that mean that it's not real?" And it's very true. It's very pertinent. It's very profound. And I spend a lot of time thinking. And something I realized maybe a year or two ago is I kind of had this idea, and I think a lot of people do as well, that when I'm kind of sitting at home or sitting at my desk or sitting even in class potentially or doing homework and my mind starts to wander, I think we are under many of us, I don't want to speak for everybody, but many of us are under the impression that we're wasting time or we're being unproductive or we're being undisciplined. And that may be true in certain circumstances, but in my personal opinion, it's very, very difficult to waste time completely, right? There's almost anything you could possibly do, you can gain some sort of positive from it. And thinking is certainly something, an activity that falls into that category. And I think that I make a lot of progress in my life in various fields and in various situations and in various ways solely from processing thoughts in my mind. Whether it be in the shower, dozing off before bed, eating a meal by myself. I make a lot of progress towards the goals that I'm striving for without actually participating in those activities, so long as I am participating mentally and thoughtfully. And I think there are, and I would say almost undoubtedly every day, thoughts that we have, and not just have, but thoughts that we dwell on and let materialize and analyze and contemplate that produce success, happiness, positive influences of all kinds in our lives. And I think it's very important to not overlook the power of thought, and not just the power of thought, but retract from this idea that thinking is a waste of time. Because I think we all understand that it's not, but at least myself personally, I used to be almost afraid to zone out and think deeply about something if I was in the midst of another activity. And I don't think that that's something I'm afraid of anymore, because I think patience is progress, and I'm very comfortable letting my brain account for a lot of the progress that I make, alongside certainly participating in activities tactfully and tangibly and physically. So yeah.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add. I think you put that very nicely.
Lovely. Thank you. All right. Should we wrap it up? The final movie quote of the day.
This is a quote that affected me a lot when I first heard it. And okay, the quote is, "We'll always have Paris. We didn't have. We lost it. Until you came to Casablanca. We got it back last night." And the reason this quote is so significant is essentially, again, spoiler alert, this guy, Rick, meets this woman, Elsa, in Paris a while back, right before the German occupation of France. They fall in love, and then when the Germans come into France, they're forced to flee, and they make a plan to leave together. Now, at the time that they're supposed to leave, she doesn't go with him, and she leaves without him. And he's left on his own, and he's heartbroken because he's never going to see her again, and it's this tragic, breaking moment. And they meet again in Casablanca, and he's really bitter. He's unhappy because of this thing that she left him in Paris. and they don't have amicable relations until this one night when they kind of make up and um, get back together, essentially. And it looks like that the movie's going to end with both of them leaving to go to the U.S. together and happy ever after. And that's the plan, and that's what it looks like the ending scene is going to be. And then you're thrown for this massive curveball because he decides at the end that in reality that she is going to go with this other guy and he's going to stay behind, and they're going to separate essentially what will be forever.
Louis, have your man go with Mr. Laszlo and take care of his luggage.
Certainly, Rick. Anything you say. Find Mr. Laszlo's luggage and put it on the plane.
Yes, sir.
This way, please.
If you don't mind, you fill in the names. That'll make it even more official.
You think of everything, don't you?
And the names are Mr. and Mrs. Victor Laszlo.
But why my name, Richard?
Because you're getting on that plane.
I don't understand. What about you?
I'm staying here with him till the plane gets safely away.
No, Richard, no. What has happened to you last night?
Last night we said a great many things. You said I was to do the thinking for both of us. Well, I've done a lot of it since then. It all adds up to one thing. You're getting on that plane with Victor where you belong.
But, Richard, no,
Now, you've got to listen to me. You have any idea what you'd have to look forward to if you stayed here? 9 chances out of 10, we'd both wind up at a concentration camp. Isn't that true, Louis?
I'm afraid Major Strasser would insist.
You're saying this only to make me go.
I'm saying it because it's true. Inside of us, we both know you belong with Victor. You're part of his work, the thing that keeps him going. If that plane leaves the ground and you're not with him, you'll regret it. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon and for the rest of your life.
But what about us?
We'll always have Paris. We didn't have. We lost it until you came to Casablanca. We got it back last night.
When I said I would never leave you.
And you never will. But I've got a job to do, too. Where I'm going, you can't follow. What I've got to do, you can't be any part of. Ilsa, I'm no good at being noble, but it doesn't take much to see that the problems of 3 little people don't amount to a hill of beans in this crazy world. Someday you'll understand that. Now. Here's looking at you, kid.
What's so astonishing to me about this is the line, "We'll always have Paris." Because obviously the time in Paris is in the past, right? But his justification for why he's okay, or why he's willing to let her go again, is because of the memory of something that happened in the past. And it's so mind-boggling to me, or it was mind-boggling at the time, that essentially a memory can constitute something so profound that you can carry it with you into the future. And like that memory, that time in Paris, is always gonna stay with him and be sufficient for him to let her go. And that was just something that was so puzzling to me, because I couldn't fathom how a memory could be the same, could constitute the same thing as being with this person in the future, and how he was willing to sacrifice that. And his justification was that memory of Paris. And it really hit me, because I had always been thinking, okay, future. I gotta look to the future, try to keep things and hold them as long as I can. And the ease with which he just lets go because he has something good in the past is just, it really did a number on me.
Yeah, seems like you've thought about this quite a bit over the years.
Yes.
I think memories, I mean, we could talk all day and talked about thinking a few short moments ago. I think the relationship between, or the dichotomy between memories and relationships, the conjunction between them, it's interesting when you think about the power of history on a relationship. Take you and me, let's say, right? We've been through all kinds of interesting moments, interesting memories, things that we've done, things that we've said, things that we've seen. That's really powerful, and not only powerful, but it largely constructs those relationships. And if you think about a romantic relationship, obviously even more so potentially, I think that it's impossible, I would venture to say, to let memories completely fade away and be independent of a relationship that you have with somebody. They have to come into play. They have to protrude within that relationship, and they have to influence the relationship in a very powerful way. So, I also don't have much more. I think obviously you laid it out tremendously, and I applaud you for that. But it is a really good line. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So that was the end of part one, the movies. And be sure to stay tuned for the next video, which is part two, which is our top 5 TV shows, which can be found at the link above or in the description. So, yes, see you guys next time for part 2. Take care.
Oh, yeah. Stay tuned.